The Labour Party had their annual conference just this weekend, and honestly, it wasn't that interesting. There were a few strange things that were said, and maybe I'll cover it in a different video, but there's one thing that really stood out to me. Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, said that ethno-nationalism is on the rise in Britain. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to take a listen to what Shabana said, and then we're just going to talk about it.
There are some who we will never be able to persuade. But there are others, a growing number, who are on a path from patriotism towards ethno-nationalism. And this can be stopped.
Now, ethno-nationalism, for those who don't know, is broadly the belief that a particular piece of land, a particular nation, a particular country belongs to a certain ethnic group. So Japan, for example, Japan belongs to the ethnically Japanese people. China belongs to the ethnically Chinese people. And if you were to carry that view over to England, well then England belongs to the ethnically English people. That's pretty much the gist of the view. Now, different people out there will have different definitions. Some of them might even give you a better definition than that, but I think that's enough to start going on. Straight away, I know there are going to be some people saying, well, what do you mean by the ethnically English people? But actually, it's really easy to define because the English are an ethnic group. This is ripped straight from Wikipedia. The English people are an ethnic group and nation native to England who speak the English language, a West Germanic language, and share a common ancestry, history, and culture. The English identity began with the Anglo-Saxons when they were known as the Anglesyn, meaning Anglican or English people. Their ethnonym is derived from the Angles, one of the Germanic peoples who invaded Britain around the 5th century AD. So yes, the English people are a distinct ethnic group. In fact, so much so, yes, it started with immigration onto these islands, but actually since 1066 all the way up until 1950, there was basically no migration here whatsoever. And now the English people actually have distinct genetic markers. Yes, we are an ethnic group, and a lot of people don't seem to understand that. They understand it for the Celts, they understand it for the Japanese, but they don't seem to be able to grasp that for the English people. Actually, we're one of the least disturbed ethnic groups in the world, kind of because we sit on this island, very easy to defend, very few invasions since 1066. So yes, we formed our own group. And look, it's nothing to do with where you were born, it's all to do with your ancestry. Rudyard Kipling was born in India. He spent the first 20 years of his life in India, but guess what? He's not Indian. Everyone knows that Rudyard Kipling is not Indian. He's English. He was simply stationed in India with his family during the era of the British Empire. So that's what I mean when I'm talking about ethnically English. It's not skin color, because there are loads of different ethnic groups that are also white. The Poles, for example, they're all white. But the Poles and the English are two distinct ethnic groups. Now, ethno-nationalism is often contrasted with something called civic nationalism, which is another sort of right-leaning position. And for the civic nationalists, it's not about your ethnicity, so it's irrelevant whether you are ethnically English or not. That doesn't give you any special place in England. England doesn't particularly belong to you. It's just all about your beliefs and your value system. So if you believe the right things, whatever that happens to be, I'm not going to bother trying to define it, then England as much belongs to you as it does to the ethnically English people. Okay, now both of these positions stand in stark contrast against multiculturalism, which is the view that actually not only can any ethnic group migrate to England, but they don't even have to fit in or change their way of life to assimilate with us. They can actually just keep doing whatever they want, and the native English people are going to have to suck it up. Kind of an insane viewpoint, but that's what we've been living with for the last 30, 40, 50 years. That was a long introduction, but there's a reason that I did it, and it's because I want to point something out. A lot of people on the right wing of British politics say that they are civic nationalists. They would claim publicly that they don't care where you come from as long as you came here legally, you pay your taxes, and you don't break the law. Okay, fine. Well, I don't believe them. I think a lot of those people are actually ethnic nationalists to a certain extent. They do recognise the importance of ethnicity. They would not want the English people to become a minority in England, which, by the way, is going to happen in about 15 or 20 years. I think a lot of those people would recognise that if England was 5% English and 95% some other ethnic group, they would feel uncomfortable. Even if those people were adopting British values, whatever British really means at that point, when there's not really that many native British people left. As long as they adopted some value system, they'd be totally fine with England being 5% English. Well, it certainly makes me feel uneasy. And I think that's because I accept, as an English person, that it was my ancestors that built this country, and they built it for me, and they built it for my children, which do not yet exist, by the way, but they will do one day. And they built it for us. They didn't build it for the whole world to just move here and adopt some value system. They built it for us. They fought for us. Everything they did was for future generations. Often, these massive cathedrals and churches that you see, they took like 200 years to build. The guy who started building it and paid for it knew that he would never see it, but he was doing it for future generations of English people. So that's a really fundamental point to take on. And a lot of these civic nationalists, I really do believe, actually are starting to recognize the importance of ethnicity in this discussion. You can disagree with me in the comments. You are more than welcome to. So what exactly does the ethno-nationalist position boil down to? Is it the idea that only the English people can live in England? Well, I'm sure there's someone out there who believes that, but I've never come across them. It tends to be something more like this, based on what I've read on Twitter and other places. They would be happy if England, for the most part, was 90% English. And of the remaining 10% of people who are not English but live in England, we would sort of assess them on a case-by-case basis to determine whether or not they can stay. So if you're a Sharia court judge, you're probably not going to make it into that sort of 10%. Whereas someone like, I don't know, maybe Rishi Sunak would make it into that top 10%, right? Depends on your particular view of Rishi Sunak. And I think that is the position that most people, whether they're ethno-nationalists or civic nationalists, actually kind of want. I think people are getting wrapped up in this terminology, but they sort of want the same thing. Everyone can think of someone who's not ethnically English that they would not want to, see forced out of the country. I can. My friend Danny Roscoe, I don't want to see Danny Roscoe get deported out of the country, right? But at the same time, I recognise that we can't allow the English people to become a minority in their homeland. Now, the term ethno-nationalism has a really bad press, but I guarantee you that almost everyone is an ethno-nationalist for somewhere, just not England, bizarrely. Take Israel, for example. A lot of people believe that the state of Israel has a right to exist there because it's the home of the Jewish people, and they were there 3, 4, 5,000 years ago before they were eventually displaced, right? Okay, interesting. So what you're saying is that piece of land belongs to that ethnic group simply because of who they are. It's their ancestral homeland, and so they should have a state there. Got it. Very, very interesting. But then on the flip side of that, for the pro-Palestinians, they make exactly the same argument. They would say, actually, no, the land belongs to the Palestinians because it's their ancestral homeland and they've always been there. In both cases, they're making an ethno-nationalist argument, right? Probably without realizing it, but that is exactly what they're doing. They're saying that actually this piece of land belongs to this group of people simply because of who they are, and it's their ancestral homeland. Well, why isn't that true of England then? Another example, Kurdistan. Now, a lot of people have forgotten all about the Kurdish struggle, but the Kurds are a group of people who all live in pretty much the same area, an area which crosses multiple different countries' borders, and they are fighting tooth and nail to establish a Kurdish state. Now, if you side with the Kurds and not, say, the Turks, and you think that the Kurds should have a state because they are one homogenous ethnic group who wants their own state and wants to be ruled by their own people, if you side with the Kurds, you are an ethno-nationalist for the Kurdish people. You are saying that they should have that land because that land is their ancestral homeland and they are of that ethnic group. That's ethno-nationalism, but for the Kurds. Another example, right? Kind of a strange one. Africa. Have you ever noticed that a map of Africa has perfectly straight lines for all of the countries? And that's because the Europeans went in, colonized, and divided all the countries up into perfectly straight lines. But what they didn't do was take into any consideration the different ethnic groups that lived there. Now, the end result is that you could have an ethnic group like this, and the Europeans just come in and put a country dividing boundary straight between their ethnic homeland. And guess what? That has caused no end of trouble. But if you think that that's wrong, and the line should have gone like this, to keep that ethnic group all together in the same single country, well then you are kind of an ethno-nationalist, right? Because you're saying, actually, it's important to the makeup of a country to consider the ethnic people who belong to that land. And that's an ethno-nationalist position. So my point is just this. If you actually quiz people and interrogate them, you will usually find that they are an ethno-nationalist for somewhere. It's just bizarrely never England. It's never allowed to be their own country. It's just other countries. And that's really, really strange, isn't it? Let me leave you with this final thought. Pretty much any idea, any ideology, any worldview taken to the extreme or in the control of the wrong hands can pretty much be a terrible thing. If you elect a leader who suddenly starts deporting Welsh people back to Wales, you know that things have gone a bit awry. But at the same time, to not talk about the importance of ethnic groups and to talk about the English people and their ancestry and their ties to this land and this being their homeland, to simply not have that discussion is ridiculous. And I think people are scared to talk about it because someone's going to call them racist or someone's going to call them a bigot or whatever. But look, if we don't have these discussions, other people will have them. But they won't do it from the perspective of, I love my own people, the English people, and I love my homeland, and I want my homeland to remain the homeland of my people. They'll have it from the perspective of, I hate these other groups. And I don't hate any other ethnic group whatsoever. Absolutely not. But I do love my own people, I do love my homeland, and I want it to stay that way. I will say this as well. The English people literally never consented to mass migration. At no point in history did we consent to this. We kept voting for lower migration and we kept getting more and more and more. All the way to the point where we're going to become a minority in our own country. And that's not democratic. That's actually just tyrannical. For that to have happened to us here in England, when we expressly voted against it, I've spoken about this before, but 1968, Gallup, a polling organisation, discovered that, guess what? 83% of people wanted lower or no migration. But what did we get? More migration. Sorry, there's a tractor behind me, so I was getting distracted. I've actually totally forgotten what I was saying, but look, the English people never consented to mass migration. So the fact that we're actually going to become a minority in England when we never even consented to any migration is just frankly staggering. Like, how does that happen? How is that fair? Well, it's not. It's tyrannical, it's anti-democratic. So we do have some real problems, and until people have the guts to talk about these issues honestly and frankly and say what they're thinking, that they feel like they are losing their homeland. 1,000 years with basically no immigration, no invasions, and now all of a sudden we're becoming a minority here. Like, what's going on? It doesn't make sense. So people do have to have these discussions, and I'm just rambling now, so I'm going to shut up. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, please do leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in a future video. Thank you very much. I'm tired.